Diplomat's Archives, Hidden Stories. This is the 12th story. On June 25, 1950, the Korean War broke out. Right after the war broke out, the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting. At this meeting, the Council adopted Resolution 82, calling on North Korea to stop its hostile actions and withdraw its troops north of the 38th parallel. When North Korea failed to respond, the Security Council adopted Resolution 83 on June 27th, recommending that member states provide assistance to South Korea to repel the armed attack and restore international peace and security. This led to the formation of the first ever United Nations forces since the UN's founding. Officially, 16 countries contributed combat troops, while 6 others provided medical support. However, there were countless other soldiers who fought not under their own nation's flag, but under the flag of another country for freedom. Among them are Mexican soldiers. To learn more about their story, we visited the Embassy of Mexico.
Carlos Peñafiel, México de esa, Inmira.
As mentioned earlier, Mexico was not an official troop-contributing country in the Korean War.
El gobierno mexicano, al terminar la Segunda Guerra Mundial, basa su política exterior en un principio fundamental que es no intervención. Y con base en este principio decide no alinearse con ninguno de los dos grandes ejes que formaban la Guerra Fría. Pero algo que caracteriza a México y a los mexicanos es nuestro principio de solidaridad. Y por eso se envía ayuda humanitaria, alimentos, medicinas a Corea del Sur durante la guerra.
At the time, Mexico provided around $350,000 worth of supplies to Korea. Today, that will be equivalent to about $4 million.
Aquí algo que es importante tomar en cuenta que en aquel entonces el PIB per cápita de México era de $350. Cuando hablamos de $350,000, estamos hablando de una cantidad importante, relevante de dinero. Hoy, a lo mejor con todo el efecto de la inflación y eso, pareciera no ser mucho, pero en su momento estamos hablando de donaciones importantes.
But there's another historical fact we must not overlook. A significant number of Mexican soldiers fought in the Korean War under the banner of the U.S. military.
Se calcula que aproximadamente poco más de 100,000 mexicanos participaron durante la Guerra de Corea bajo la bandera de las Naciones Unidas y el ejército y el comando del ejército norteamericano.
That's right. An estimated 1.789 million American troops served in the Korean War in man days, and of those, about 180,000 were Hispanic. Excluding around 60,000 who were Puerto Rican, it is believed that the remaining 120,000 were Mexicans and Mexican Americans. But how was it possible for so many Mexicans to serve in the U.S. military and take part in the Korean War?
Déjeme decirle, a raíz de que México entra en la guerra en la Segunda Guerra Mundial en 1943-2, se firma un acuerdo entre el gobierno de Estados Unidos y el gobierno de México. De hecho, es un acuerdo que se firma, para darles la fecha exacta, el 22 de enero de 1943, en donde permitía que los residentes, ya fueran norteamericanos o mexicanos, en cualquiera de los dos países, se pudieran enlistar en los ejércitos de cualquiera de los dos países sin perder su nacionalidad.
Thanks to this agreement, Mexicans living in the U.S. were allowed to serve in the U.S. military, while Americans living in Mexico could serve in the Mexican armed forces. But how did this agreement between Mexico and the U.S. come about? To find out more, we spoke with an expert.
안녕하세요. 저는 아주대학교 사학과 박구병입니다.
Professor Park Gu-byung has been deeply interested in and actively researching topics such as 19th and 20th century Latin American political history, U.S.-Latin America relations, and Latino immigrants in the U.S.
1910년대 멕시코는 흔히 혁명이라고 부르는 대대적인 정치, 사회적 변혁을 겪었습니다. 이런 흐름은 1930년대 말 어떤 민족주의적인 정서가 최고조에 이르는 단계에까지 확대되었는데요. 반면에 1940년대에 들어서선 독자적이고 민족주의적인 어떤 기운을 강력하게 이제 추진했던 그런 흐름과는 다른 추세가 펼쳐지게 됩니다. 그것은 유럽 쪽에서 있었던 이제 전쟁 때문이죠.
On September 1st, 1939, World War II began when Germany invaded Poland. Afterwards, the Axis powers, led by Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the Allied powers, led by the UK, the US, and the Soviet Union, engaged in a global conflict. The US entered World War II following Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. This raised tensions in neighboring Mexico, which had been maintaining neutrality. Then, in 1942, a German submarine sank 2 Mexican oil tankers in the Gulf of Mexico.
En 1942, submarinos alemanes hunden 2 petroleros mexicanos que se encontraban en el Golfo de México. Y como respuesta a esta agresión por parte de las potencias del eje, México toma la decisión de declarar la guerra a Alemania y a las potencias del eje. En ese marco, México envía soldados a pelear durante la Segunda Guerra Mundial y se firma en 1943 el acuerdo al que estoy haciendo referencia, en donde permitía que ciudadanos que residían en uno u otro país pudieran enlistarse ya sea en el ejército norteamericano o en el ejército mexicano, pero sin perder su nacionalidad, como ciudadanos mexicanos si lo hacían en el ejército norteamericano o como ciudadanos norteamericanos si lo hacían en el ejército mexicano.
During World War II, cooperation between Mexico and the U.S. extended beyond military matters.
제2차 세계대전 중인 1942년 미국 정부는 자국의 노동력이 부족해지자 적극적으로 멕시코인들을 농업 노동자로 받아들이는 초청 노동자 프로그램을 전개했습니다. 브라세로 프로그램이라고 얘기하는데요. 이 프로그램은 1942년부터 1964년까지 지속되게 됩니다. 특히 이제 그 전쟁 기만 좁혀 생각한다면 1940년대 중반까지 약 20만에서 25만까지의 멕시코인들이 또 미국에 파견되어 또 정착하게 되는 그런 사건들이 이제 펼쳐지게 됩니다.
During World War II, as exchanges between Mexico and the U.S. increased, the number of Mexicans living in the U.S. also grew steadily. Given this context, it's reasonable to estimate that a significant number of Mexicans served in the U.S. military under the earlier mentioned military service agreement between the two countries. The agreement between the U.S. and Mexico respecting military service was signed in 1943 and ended in 1952. And while the agreement was still in effect, the Korean War broke out in 1950. At that time, the country that sent the largest number of troops was none other than the U.S. A total of about 1.789 million American soldiers served in the Korean War in man days. And it is estimated that around 120,000 of those soldiers were Mexicans and Mexican Americans. And we had the opportunity to connect with a Mexican veteran who served in the U.S. military during the Korean War via video call.
안녕.
안녕하세요.
This is Korean War veteran Roberto Sierra Barbosa, wearing a cap that says Korean War veteran.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, you see now? Well, this?
Yes.
My cover is
Roberto, who currently lives in Guadalajara, Mexico, arrived in Korea on July 27, 1950. It was just 1 month after the outbreak of the Korean War.
I wear this proudly. I've been honored with this medal from the Ministry International Relations. And I was honored with this, and I was this decorations. It was earned to me by the government in the United States.
He served as a communications soldier with the 1st Marine Division of the U.S. Marines and fought in 4 major battles, including the Battle of Lake Changjin. Wounded in combat, he returned to Mexico in December 1951.
We all survivors live with them every second of the minute, of the hour, of the day. We cannot say we forgot, no. We got it in our mind. You know, you have visited the river, the Han River. Well, when we saw there, the Han River, there was a lot of human casualties floated in the water. The water in the Han River was red, very bloody. Many of my fellows started to vomit, could resist that. It was a disaster. We were 176 recruits, youngsters, to be trained. We went overseas. We went to your country. Out of 167, only 68 came back. And what else could I say about?
Roberto still vividly remembers the horrors of war he witnessed 75 years ago when he was just 22 years old and fought in the Korean War. We wanted to learn more about the Mexican soldiers who participated in the Korean War. While looking for an expert on the topic, we found an author who has written a book about Mexican soldiers who fought in World War II and the Korean War.
My name is Carlos Harrison. I am a writer. One of my books is called The Ghosts of Hero Street.
Carlos, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and the son of a Korean War veteran, spent 6 years researching before completing his book, The Ghosts of Hero Street. The book tells the story of the Mexican community in 2nd Street, also known as Hero Street in Silvis, Illinois.
The reason that this little 1.5 block long stretch of the United States is called Hero Street is because they actually sent more, at the time, more men off to fight in World War II in Korea than any other place that size anywhere in the country.
Among the people living in this neighborhood, 57 men among 22 families enlisted in the U.S. military and fought in World War II and the Korean War. And 8 of them died during the wars.
And so when people talk about Hero Street, yes, these people made the ultimate sacrifice and their service must be honored. But the reality is that the service of all of these families on this street needed to be honored. And that's why I started writing it.
Starting around 1910, following the Mexican Revolution, the number of Mexicans migrating to the U.S. began to increase. As a result, Mexican communities were established across the country, and Mexicans began settling on Hero Street in Silvis, Illinois, around 1929.
What's probably most interesting to you is the Korean aspect, the Korean War. And here, there were 2 guys from Silvis Street from Hero Street that went to fight there. One's name was Joe Gomez, who everybody called Cheppy, and the other was Johnny Munoz.
Joe Gomez served in the 2nd Infantry Division, known as the Warrior Division, during the Korean War. On July 23, 1950, the 2nd Infantry Division arrived in Busan, becoming the first unit sent directly from the U.S. to set foot on Korean soil. On April 22, 1951, the Spring Offensive by approximately 700,000 of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army began. Along with the North Korean forces, they launched attacks on the Western Front in April and on the Eastern Front in May. And Lieutenant Gomez fought against them in this offensive. On May 17, 1951, at 10 p.m., Chinese and North Korean forces launched an attack on the front line where Lieutenant Gomez's platoon was stationed. As the platoon leader, Lieutenant Gomez bravely fought alongside his 26 men against the enemy. He even succeeded in capturing enemy machine gun bunkers, turning the tide of the battle. During the fight, 1 soldier was killed and 8, including Lieutenant Gomez, were wounded. Lieutenant Gomez was taken to the hospital, but sadly died from his severe injuries on May 28th.
And Johnny Munoz had a premonition. Johnny told him after he had been called up and he was going to leave, he had been seeing this girl, Mary Becerra. They got married. They had a, very brief, honeymoon time together. And he's already called up. He had to go to training, and he got to come home and visit, and then went back to training. And just when his unit got their orders that they were going to be called up to go overseas, he begged. He said, "Okay, if we're going, can I just go one more time? Can I go see Mary?" And his company commander relented and said, "Sure." And he gave him 17 days off. And that's probably what killed him, because while he was on leave, everyone else in his company was sent to Germany. And by the time he got back, the people he joined up with went to Korea. And all Johnny could think about was just, can I get home? Can I get home? If I can do my 6 months, I can come home. But on the night of August 28th, in a battle that became known as the Battle of Bloody Ridge, After Action report described Johnny's death. They said he was hit by a mortar shell and penetrated through and through with shrapnel. The body was never recovered. But back on Hero Street, they said that he probably was blown into so many pieces there wasn't enough to send home.
Johnny wanted nothing more than to return home quickly and be with his family, but was sadly killed in action. Despite the many Mexican soldiers who fought, suffered, and sacrificed their lives in the Korean War, their stories still remain largely unknown to the world.
No se sabe muy bien en México y no se sabe muy bien en Corea, en ninguno de los dos países. Y yo creo que es una deuda que tenemos pendientes, tanto el gobierno como los pueblos de México y Corea.
Perhaps one reason the stories of Mexican involvement in the Korean War have not been widely shared is that research on the Korean War itself has not been as extensive or multifaceted as we might assume. Moon Kwan-hyun, a journalist at Yeonham News who has long covered diplomacy, security, and defense, and who also earned a master's degree for his research on countries that participated in the Korean War, says that, contrary to popular belief, research on the Korean War remains surprisingly limited.
현실적으로 6.25 전쟁을 연구하는 학자가 많지가 않습니다. 연구 성과가 다른 전쟁에 비해서 굉장히 많지가 않는 이유는 그 연구를 함으로써 본인이 학자로서 인정을 받거나 또는 연구비를 타낼 수 있는 그런 기회가 많지 않다는 것이 어떻게 보면은 우리가 공적인 가치 기준 판단에서 많이 밀렸다고 저는 생각합니다. 과거에 연구한 것 이상으로 새로운 자료를 가지고 연구를 하려고 하는 학자가 아마 거의 없다고 저는 봅니다. 그래서 항상 그 연구가 한국전쟁 이후에 한때 되었던 연구를 재탕 삼탕하는 또는 같은 자료, 같은 내용, 같은 이야기를 반복하는 상황이 계속되고 있다는 것이 참으로 안타까운 현실입니다.
Another reason is that the Korean War was a highly unpopular war. It broke out just 5 years after the end of World War II, a time when many people were ready to leave the horrors of war behind and move on. To better understand how people felt about the Korean War at the time, we spoke with an expert via video conference.
My name is Jong Woo-han. I'm the Distinguished Professor of Underwood International College of Yonsei University. Also, I serve as President of the Korean War Legacy Foundation.
Since 2012, Dr. Han Jong-woo has been interviewing Korean War veterans and building a digital archive of their stories. So far, he has interviewed roughly 1,500 veterans from 23 countries, including Korea and other countries that participated in the war.
The war was very hard. The weather was very, very cold, right? And when they left during the war, because, the American soldiers, there was 6 months service period, so that after 6 months they left. When they left, war was not finished, war was not winning, and they have a very bitter memories about the Korean War. And as soon as they came back to their home, they were asked, where have you been for 6 months? American citizens didn't pay any attention to it. Why? Because they didn't really know about Korea, and also they didn't have to do the ration. And then the war was not finished as a victory, right? The war finished as a ceasefire, armistice. That's a really drastic contrast between the World War II and the Korean War.
About 120,000 Mexican soldiers fought in the Korean War under the U.S. flag. But it's only relatively recently that attention has begun to be paid to their contributions.
De hecho, permítanme platicarles. Se empieza a visibilizar más el tema en 2019 a iniciativa de la Embajada de México, porque el familiar de un diplomático mexicano peleó durante la Guerra de Corea. Entonces se empiezan a hacer más investigaciones, se empieza a visibilizar más el tema. Vemos que son soldados olvidados. La Embajada de México en Corea empieza a trabajar sobre el tema, empieza a investigar, y la Embajada de Corea en México también tiene una gran reacción. Generan ellos una campaña en 2020, la Embajada, repito, de Corea en México, que se llama Búsqueda de Veteranos Mexicanos de la Guerra de Corea. Esto es junio de 2020 y por los medios de comunicación empiezan a informar a la población y empiezan a buscar a estos veteranos. Entonces ha sido un esfuerzo relativamente reciente el que han hecho los dos gobiernos, tanto el gobierno de México como el gobierno de Corea.
However, there's one more thing the Mexican veterans want to see before they pass away. The Mexican ambassador shared with our team a conversation he had with one of these veterans. Here is a part of that story. One day, the Mexican ambassador met with a Mexican veteran who shared his story. He said,
"Ambassador, I visited the Korean War Memorial and saw the flags of the countries that participated, but I didn't see the Mexican flag anywhere. Before I die, I really want to see it there. Because so many Mexican soldiers fought in the Korean War, a great many of them. Many of my Mexican and Mexican-American friends lost their lives during the war. Yet, our flag was nowhere to be found. Before I die, I would like to see it."
La relación entre nuestros pueblos va mucho más allá de 63 años de relaciones diplomáticas que llevamos entre nuestros dos países. El dar a conocer esta participación de soldados mexicanos y mexicoamericanos, además de honrar su memoria, nos dejarían ver que el contacto humano, el contacto persona a persona entre nuestros dos países, entre nuestros dos grandes países, va mucho más allá de los temas comerciales o de los temas diplomáticos o de los temas políticos. Ha sido un encuentro humano, ha sido un encuentro fraterno, ha sido un encuentro de solidaridad.
The Mexican veterans of the Korean War, often referred to as forgotten warriors, but they never forgot Korea.
Now, it's a proud city, a proud people in Korea, that it makes me think that I have survived for something good. I feel really pride that I had the opportunity in 50 years, only 50 years, from being nothing, they get up like a phoenix from the ashes. In 50 years, your country went up. I admire really the new generations of Koreans.
Then what can we do to remember them and never forget?
So we have about 1,500 Korean War veterans interview, and the old people working for the Korean War Legacy Foundation, they are part-time history and social studies teachers in the United States and other UN country. So that we have one team that actually listening this interview every day, and they enter more metadata, more information about those interview. So we make this interview as a database and make it much more advanced with the more complicated and sophisticated metadata and keywords so that people can retrieve easy. And then there are another group of teachers who are writing using those interviews, using those keywords into the curricular resources so that other teachers can use it in their classroom when they talk about the Korean War in the context of the Cold War.
과거의 역사를 우리가 모를 때 상대방이 안다는 것은 굉장히 부끄러운 현실입니다. 우리가 더 알아야 되고 고마웠습니다. 잊지 않겠습니다. 그리고 저희들이 도울 수 있다면 도와주겠습니다. 이게 지금 대한민국이 보여줘야 될 자세라고 보거든요. 이거는 한마디로 말씀드리면 보훈외교라고 이게 볼 수가 있는데요. 이게 어떤 군사적인 분야를 떠나서 정치, 경제, 문화 이 모든 분야로 저는 확산이 돼야 한다고 봅니다. 지금 국제사회에서는 하나의 도움을 받았던 나라였는데요. 이제는 도움을 주는 나라로 바뀌었는데 무엇을 줘야 되는지, 누구한테 줘야 되는지, 어떻게 주어야 되는지에 대해서는 진지한 고민이 안 돼 있다고 저는 봅니다. 지금이라도 6.25에 대한 한국전쟁에 대한 참전했던 나라들의 기여에 대한 연구를 하고 그 연구를 바탕으로 그 나라의 관계를 다시 설정하고 다시 출발하는 이런 계기가 됐으면 좋겠다는 게 제 생각입니다.
Only when we educate the younger generation and conduct proper research on the countries that participated in the Korean War will we be able to properly remember all veterans, including those from Mexico.
Regresamos, hombres arruinados por la fatiga que causa tener que morir tantas veces. Miradas estúpidas de ojos que otrora lanzaron chispas de energía y vivacidad. Jóvenes de los 20 a los 30 años con la expresión de un anciano.
"75 years ago, when the Korean War broke out, if not for the soldiers who came from distant lands, the Korea we know today might not even exist." Every June, we hold commemorative events to remember the Korean War and the veterans who fought in it. And we say, let us never forget this painful history. But after interviewing Roberto, one thought came to mind. Do we remember the history of the Korean War as often and as deeply as the veterans do?
I wish you will never have another such experience like we had back in 1950. You try hardly, you young people try hardly to preserve the peace. Thank you very much. Talking to you with many years over my shoulders. 98 already.
They came to a country they had never even heard of and gave their lives to defend it. They were wounded, went missing, or still carry the full weight of their memories from the war. We must remember them more often and more deeply. And we must not forget that many of them came from Mexico.